What's going on, Luka here? And today, this is going to be a special kind of edition of Ask Luka. And the reason why is this. So, you guys know I'm a big fan of precision nutrition and the habits when it comes to behavioral change, to nutritional change, to getting your results. We've outlined an infographic with the 10 habits. And, there's more than 10 habits, of course. And even with the 10 habits, a lot of not only clients, but people in general, will ask me, well, but where do I start? What are the most important habits? And usually in our 30-day blueprint, we focus on getting the water in, so drinking enough water, having protein with every meal, and upping the veggies. But this is not set in stone. So after a really good resource is Josh Hillis's book and Dan John's book, Fat Loss Happens on Monday. There's some strategies in there that were really well sequenced, and I wanted to cover those and kind of how we connect PN and these strategies, especially because different people do well with different things, or I should say different strategies. Nothing is one size fits all in coaching and in nutrition. One of the biggest, I would say, bottlenecks is that the story that like, oh, they did it like this, it's not working for me, so thus I'm unsuccessful, I'm wrong, I can't do it, which is not true. Maybe you just need to flip it around a little bit. So I'm going to cover 5 different strategies today and kind of just coach you through this and kind of, let you know what I see with clients and, what we've had success with and how different things work for different people. And you might find yourself in that, which would be great. If, like I said, if you're stuck, you might be watching this and saying like, wow, okay, this makes a lot more sense. Okay, so I wrote this up on the board. So strategy number 1 is by the numbers. And here's the thing, a lot of people do well with that, but I would say that this is usually where most of the kind of stuck happens, right? If this doesn't work, then I'm wrong, like I can't do it. So by the numbers really is the habits that we're going to focus on. Think of 2 sequences, right? So this is sequence 1, this is sequence 2. And in sequence 1, these are the 3 habits that we focus on. Journaling. Now, journaling is so important, right? Because it creates awareness, right? It creates awareness. And with journaling, you see what you're actually truly doing, right? It's like the question, like, what's your nutrition? Like, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Pretty good can mean a lot of different things, right? The numbers and showing what you do works best. Now, journaling, you have I would say, written and online apps. We like MyFitnessPal, which is the best. In this case, I like MyFitnessPal because you will actually see the amount of calories you eat, your macronutrient breakdown. It just gives you more information. And for the people that like by the numbers, this works really well. So our first habit here is to start journaling. Our second habit here is to have protein with every meal. And you'll hear different numbers. I like 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Very simple. If you weigh 200 pounds, it's around 160 to 200 grams of protein per day, right? So that becomes then simple. 0.8, usually I'd say 0.8 for women, 1 gram for guys, works pretty well. And then habit number 3 is calories, okay? So if we set a calorie goal, and like I said, you got a pretty, I would say, hard fat loss goal, you'd probably be around 10 grams to 12 grams of calories per pound of body weight. So that means if I'm 200 pounds, it would be anywhere from 2,000 to 2,400 calories, right? Now the thing is, these 3 habits, we don't just knock them out in one go. 1 per week would be usually pretty good. Sometimes it may be a little bit more. Sometimes it may be a little bit less. But the key is that we get these in check. So we start with journaling. We make sure the journaling is consistent, right? Week 1, did they journal every day? If they didn't, if they only journaled 50% of the time, if you only journal 50% of the time, we're going to keep doing this until the journaling is about 85, 90% of the time. And then we add the protein. We do the same thing. Some people will take this on and be really good about it fast. Some won't. Like I said, there's no golden rule, but we don't move to the next step until we haven't become consistent with the first one. So journaling, adding the protein, making sure we're hitting our protein every meal, and then we're starting to check our calories and trying to keep our calories in check. So that's sequence number 1. Sequence number 2, so once we've gotten that part down, I guarantee you're feeling better, you're dropping weight, it's sustainable, and you're being consistent with it, then we're going to add healthy fats, right? So most of the time, like I said, most diets don't have enough healthy fats, and a lot of times quite a bit of unhealthy fats. And healthy fats are also filling, which help with the satiety with every meal, okay? And then habit number 2 is going to be quality carbs, right? And the thing is, once you kind of get the journaling, the protein, and the calories in check, this tends to improve as is, but improving the healthy fats and quality carbs will improve body composition, which is why at the bottom I wrote, your scale weight is basically going to be very dependent on the quantity of food you eat, so the calories, right? Not completely set in stone, but if you drop your calories, your weight's going to be dropping. But what about your body fat percentage? Well, it's going to be the quality of food that you eat, right? So when you start adding more veggies, better carbs, healthy fats, that's when you start also getting leaner and building quality muscle mass. But also, it's not only the quality of the food that you eat, it's also how strong you are performance. Now, I say this because I like I said, if your outcome goal is just weight-based, you're not always influencing that. And it may be, you can see I got a little bit of stuffy nose, but hey, it may be like some of, your genetics may drive that some. You can't predict exactly when you're going to hit 30 pounds of weight loss. But what you can influence and can track is the strength and performance part of it. So like, hey, your trap bar deadlift is getting better. Hey, your performance test on a TFW push-ups is getting awesome. Your 300-yard shuttle is getting better. So that you see, when we see the quality of food improve and the performance numbers go up, the body composition is going to change. You're going to get leaner, more athletic, more like the way you want to. So, right, your scale weight, calories, your body fat percentage is going to be based mostly on, should I say, on the quality of the foods and your strength and performance. So that's your strategy 1. And like I said, I could spend quite a bit of time on each one of these, but we're gonna fly. But hopefully you got quite a bit of insight on that. Strategy number 2 is the planning and preparing strategy. And honestly, this is where a lot of people I would say, fall, okay? When you don't, right, say like preparing reduces stress, prep for success, right? I mean, that's so important. So in our first sequence here, habit number 1 is planning, right? Planning just like, hey, what am I going to eat? Like, because you start understanding like where you have problems, like, oh, it's always dinner, it's always this. So you're going to plan first, you're going to shop, cook, and journal, okay? So, and the thing is, you're planning, shopping, and cooking makes the most sense usually to do it on a Sunday, right? Sometimes you can plan and shop on Sunday and even make food on Monday. Like we found that like it's best to plan, shop, cook all on Sunday, okay? And that'll take you a lot of times out through Wednesday, Thursday, even possibly the whole week, especially if there's just certain meals that you're having trouble with. So these are like I said, we plan, shop, and cook, and those can usually be done all together. Like I said, but if it's too much, then we just plan and shop first, right? But these 3 go together very well. And then at the bottom, we got journal. So at the end of the week, on a Saturday, we'd look at the journal and see how our week went, right? Where did we fall off? What are our trouble spots? What are our trouble meals? What's going on there, right? Because based off of that, we could start looking at our 3 biggest obstacles. Now, I'll come back in a second, but first I'll cover sequence number 2. Sequence number 2 is very similar. Protein, right? Getting our proteins in, 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Our calories, our healthy fats, and our quality carbs, right? So it kind of loops back into how by the numbers person would be doing. But here we focus on these 3 because these could be a big, I would say, issue, right? If you don't plan, shop, and cook, basically you're going to be in trouble, right? Because then it's like you go into the week and you have bad habits, you resort to bad habits because those 3 haven't been in place. Which brings me to this, the 3 biggest obstacles, right? So if I ask, what are your 3 biggest obstacles going to be going into this week? For some people, it'll be like, oh, it's definitely the coworkers bringing in the donuts and this, that, and the other, right? The second one is going to be the kids at night, in the evening, eating the candies and so on and so forth, right? And after we have these three biggest obstacles, we find the three structures to overcome those obstacles. So whether that means you find a buddy at work and you guys go to lunch. Maybe you bring a protein shake in and you have some nuts in your protein shake, and now you're full and it won't really even budge you that much. Maybe it's a conversation with the coworkers to not tempt you with that stuff. So there's a bunch of structures that this is things that we usually sit down one-on-one and go over to find out what the best solution is, right? But the thing is, if you know the obstacles and you create the strategies for the obstacles when they happen, then you are prepared, right? Then you're prepared. So this is a humongous key. So think about it this way, right? You should always have plans. So what's the plan for tomorrow? Like, do I know what I'm going to be doing? Because if you don't, you're going to revert back to struggle. You're going to revert back. So you're always going to fall back to the level of your training and your habits, right? So you want to know what the plan is for that next day. Action just means, what am I eating today? So the plan I made yesterday is happening right now, right? So if you're prepared, you already know, like, what am I going to do today, right? And then journaling is just like, did I follow through with the plan yesterday, right? So you always have like the plan it, the action step of it, and then the journaling to look at how you did. Because when you look back, you can always see the obstacles, and we just keep chipping away at it. Once again, this isn't all in 1 week possibly, right? This is just working on it. This might be 3-4 weeks, and then we add week 5, 6, 7. Maybe it's later on. There is no golden rule, so don't beat yourself up. As long as you keep chipping away, you're doing well, right? And the thing is, that's one of the biggest obstacles, people having this story like, oh, it should happen next week. I should be already, doing all of this stuff and be really diligent. Like that's not true. You have to do it step by step at your pace. So it's sustainable, because then you can keep these results, okay? Number 3, also a very popular, when I say very popular, I mean that this works very well, because we'll end up coming down to the fact that this might be the best first step, okay? So the win one meal at a time strategy number 3, okay? So here's the kicker, right? I put habits, and remember, plan, shop, and cook. So at first, maybe your biggest issue is breakfast, right? And we're just going to attack breakfast, nothing else. For lunch and dinner, you keep doing what you're doing. You keep don't even think about it. That's not your focus. That's not your primary goal. But breakfast is. So our habit is going to be first plan, shop, and cook just for breakfast. Now, it could be breakfast for all week, but maybe it's just breakfast on Monday. And then somebody will say, like, what? Like, just changing breakfast on Monday is not going to really change my body. Even if you only change breakfast on Monday, it would still be 52 different breakfasts in a year, and that would change your body. But I promise you that once we start working on this, breakfast on Monday becomes breakfast on Tuesday, becomes better breakfast every day, which means that, if you have 3 meals a day, you've changed 33% of your meals in a week. And that's going to show up in your body significantly. So once we master that, once we get good with planning, shopping, cooking, journaling for breakfast, then we'd move to lunch, right? And to dinner and so forth, right? And we're always journaling. So we're always journaling each one of these to see how we're doing, right? That's just, like I said, journaling is just an awareness and a view into the reality of what's going on. Not opinions. I did pretty well, right? You can see it. Okay, you can see it. And the thing is like once we've done this, then we move on to habits, protein, and calories. And same thing, we just knock out breakfast. Make sure that breakfast is got the protein and the calories that we want to hit for our goal. Which, like I said, if it's a fat loss goal, 10 to 12 calories per pound of body weight. Then we move on to lunch. Then we move on to dinner. So all of this may be months and months and months and months, which is fine. It might be faster for some, slower for others. Guess what? If you keep chipping away at it, you will 100% see results. You'll feel better. Like I said, you'll see it on your scale weight, and you'll see it in your body fat percentage. Right? These are just 3 different strategies because different people will respond and react differently to the habit changes. Not one size fits all. All right, so I'll be back with the last 2 strategies, which are 4 and 5 in 1 second. All right, now that I blew my nose, and it's probably not much better. Going back to the last two strategies. So strategy number 4 is fullness leads to fat loss. And all of these are intertwined. They're all, all of them are important. But for someone that I would say eats very fast, right? Not knowing how, there's a certain, you may have heard that, you should chew your food 35 times. Some people say 50 times. And the thing is, that is healthy. I don't know if you'll start counting if you're going to really enjoy the food as much. But, the point is that you're conditioned essentially eating fast. Sometimes you're conditioned that full is stuffed. And I think that's sometimes a big issue, or everywhere around the world. But that, when you feel stuffed, you're like, okay, now I'm full. That's stuffed. That's not full. So our first sequence of habits in the 4 strategy is, the first one is slow eating, right? So nothing else but every meal should take at least 15 minutes to eat. And I know that possibly you, and I've been known to crunch down meals pretty fast, but I'm from Europe, so it's we tend to sit down and eat a lot slower, where if you're busy and just running and trying to get stuff, down, you might be eating food in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, right? So if that becomes your first habit, is just to eat food slower, you're going to see a big difference, right? It says fullness leads to fat loss. The second habit here is journaling. And journaling here also, it comes down to this. This would be more paper journaling, because we're going to journal, how do I feel, so when you had a meal, how do I feel after I ate a protein meal? Was I full? Did it fill me up? What about when I start eating veggies? Does that fill me up? If I eat carbs, do I get hungrier afterwards? Do fats fill me up? If I eat sugary starches, should I say sugary carbs, do I feel even more hungry? If I skip meals, do I get do I want to just crush food, right? So this journal is different than the app journal that's going to really track calories and macros and stuff. We're not focusing on that as much here. We want to start seeing our response to different foods. Some people actually get fuller eating carbs. Some people get fuller eating fats. Most people get fuller eating fats and definitely protein. But I want you to track that. Hey, when I drank water, was I not as hungry at a meal? So that's what we're doing with this type of journaling. Then our third habit is going straight into our protein, our healthy fat, and quality carbs. So you can kind of see how it goes, right? We start eating slower. Then we journal to recognize how certain macronutrients affect us. Fats and protein fill us up. Great. Carbs make us hungrier. Okay, so then we're going to focus on protein and healthy fats. And then lastly, get our quality carbs in, right? And then our second sequence is eating to 80% full, and then lastly focusing on the actual calories. And like I said, this comes back to, slow eating and eating to 80% full are kind of connected. So in a sense that 80% full is really kind of where you should be. And think of it in the process of how would somebody that's very lean eat, right? If somebody's lean and getting ready for, movie role, being on a magazine cover, they're not going to stuff themselves. They're just going to eat to 80% full, right? So that habit is huge because, like I said, after a while, you don't feel the need to get stuffed because that's just literally a habitual response. So now you can see this fullness leads to fat loss strategy, and I'm going to explain at the end. Where do you fit in? What is the thought process behind which strategy you choose? But last but not least, the one that I wanted to cover is strategy number 5, which is the mindfulness strategy. Right? This happens, and this is very important. A lot of people do not have a great relationship with food or themselves and their body parts, meaning that you're judging, and we all judge ourselves. The voices, I talk about the voices in our heads that are just thoughts. They're not necessarily real, but right, it's all the, I would say, information from our environment growing up, from our parents telling us, the TV saying you need to look a certain way. If you're like this, you're bad. This is a good food. This is a bad food, right? And we create this kind of environment that can be subconscious where we constantly beat ourselves up. So in this sense, the first thing that we do, we actually, have a gratitude journal where every single day we we find something we love about ourselves, a body part. And it doesn't matter what it is, right? Even if it's, hey, I love the way my hair is looking today, right? The point of this is to shift focus. There's a drill that we use here. It's called positive focus. And I'm not going to cover it completely, but we reframe. It's very easy to say, oh, man, I'm overweight, my love handles, and then you start focusing on it. And then that focus becomes bigger and bigger and becomes stressed out. And then you start beating yourself up and you're fat and you don't look good and nobody, right? And this becomes this cycle of like a spiral, right? And it's easy that the whole day gets kind of converted to that. So now you're beating yourself down and you have, some sugary drinks or some desserts to make yourself feel better, and it creates this habit loop that's negative. So gratitude just wakes, you're grateful for the things that you love about yourself, and you focus on, no matter how small it is, on those things, right? And that will like really shift your focus, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to shift focus to a positive outcome in a positive direction rather than a negative one. So this becomes a habit. Like I said, if for the first week we start doing our gratitude journal and, 90% of the time you're on point, great. Now we're going to focus on slow eating, which is, taking the 15 minutes to at least to get a meal in, right? From there we go to our 80% full, which is, like I said, some of the habits from the previous strategy. And then from there we journal the actual foods, whether it's online, whether it's on paper form. But like I said, so we're doing two types of different kind of journaling in this one. And then in the second sequence here, obviously we go protein, healthy fat, quality carbs. So you can kind of see how we kind of shift around with which habit we plug in, okay? So, and we could go a ton deeper in that. I've actually shot a full nutrition seminar with a 20 to 30 minute sequence just talking about, deceptive brain messages and the voices in our head and things like that, and, science stuff that you can kind of break free from. But I'm going to go down to which strategy should you use? And I say should you use, which strategy do you feel is best for you? And you probably can't see it now here, but, at the beginning you kind of start with the numbers, by the numbers, right? If you feel like you can just go into that. And remember, by the numbers is we're still shopping, we're planning, shopping, cooking the food, and then going into our journaling and doing our calories and our quality of foods. Now, if planning is a challenge, right? If it's something that you've never done, and because you're not planning, you're having a tough time keeping up with improving your nutrition, then you would go planning and preparation strategy, right? Planning and preparing strategy. If certain meals of the day are crushing you, so it's always like, man, when I come home for dinner, right? That dinner is always bad, right? Dinner is always bad. Then we'd go with the win one meal at a time strategy, okay? If you know that it stands out, that that's the biggest problem. If you feel hungry all the time, then we would go with the fullness leads to fat loss strategy, right? So if you're like, no matter what, I feel hungry, bam, we're going to hit that. And last but not least, if you have a negative relationship to food and or your body, right, then we'd go with the mindfulness strategy. And here, one thing that I forgot to kind of plug in there is that, with the gratitude, we also, talk about how we're grateful about the food that we're eating, because there's such a story behind getting angry because, so okay, now I'm improving my nutrition, and that means that I can't eat these delicious foods that I really like, and the rest of my life I'm gonna, right? So once again, we're feeding this negative story into a spiral versus being grateful that hey, after I eat this food, I feel great. I feel better about myself, my energy's better, right? So these are the things that we're putting into the gratitude journal. So it's about our body, and it's about the food that we eat. And this is extremely powerful. And now here's the thing, with both of these strategies, you're gonna see progress, but you may plateau and have to go to another strategy. And that's what's gonna happen with a lot of these, is that you're gonna have an interplay of, you start with one, it does really well for you, maybe you plateau, and then we flip over to another one, which is awesome, because it's just kind of like these progressions. But where you start, it depends on where you are. So I've kind of covered quite a bit, but I hope that now, the precision nutrition habits and principles, help you out when you see them in different strategies and where you might fit in. And like I said, this is not all set in stone, but Josh Hillis did a great job with outlining these, and I want him to share with you guys how we use them, like I said, with PN and having kind of a framework, and you might see yourself in this framework in using these different sequences. And like I said, hey, look, if you need help with coaching, accountability, access to the right thing at the right time and finding out how this works and how you get through it to get the best possible results, then, just hit us up and we'll schedule a discovery call. But this is kind of like a special edition of Ask Luka. Based on this, hey, shoot me questions and we'll go on from here. See you next time.